All right, I got the most exciting topic of this conference. Good morning, everyone. How is everyone today? All right, I'll try to wake you up. So they asked me to do this talk. As I was introduced, the Chief Digital Officer at Anthem. I was going to send my VP of Buzzwords to do this topic, but unfortunately, he's out there recruiting our Manager of Business Results actively. So if you have any candidates, please do pass them on. Rajiv@anthem.com is the email. Thank you for your consideration. So let's get all the buzzwords out of the way. So crypto, distributed ledger, decentralized, Bitcoin, ICOs, Ethereum, Hyperledger. These all buzzwords that people have heard of, read about in the news. Yeah. All right, so let's just kind of park all the buzzwords and get into kind of what is the technology, and most importantly, how could it be applied to health, and sort of explore some use cases together. So I think of it most simply as three things: a bit of information or data or a record, that's the left-hand side, a block of records, which is the block, and then the records strung together, which is the chain. So blockchain. A record of information could be me, Rajiv, has, let's say, diabetes. Let's say if a bundle of records could be I have diabetes, hypertension, I'm overweight, and I'm stressed. Well, that might lead to some heart issues. So a good thing I'm here in the clinic. But the chain would be a chronological summary of all of those things. So if I had developed sort of symptoms of diabetes a couple of years ago and have hypertension now, and have another event that's happening as we speak, those events strung together cryptographically is essentially what the blockchain is. So what's the big deal? Some key attributes that we should consider. The blockchain is transparent, so all the information that could be recorded on the chain is visible as a record. The information itself, the fact that Rajiv has diabetes or hypertension or whatever the case may be, itself is protected and encrypted. But the fact that I have this record is visible and open and transparent to everyone that's participating in that. It's decentralized. So if you stop by the Starbucks this morning to get a cup of coffee and swipe your credit card, your bank essentially is authorizing that transaction. And the debit and the credit of that particular transaction is recorded by your bank as a centralized sort of governing body for that particular transaction. What if instead we swiped that credit card at Starbucks and all of you were computers? Forgive me for saying that. But you then authenticated that transaction and said, debit my card and credit Starbucks, and we record that across all of this decentralized network of computers. In which case you wouldn't need a bank, which is another sort of key attribute of blockchain, which is that it's decentralized and it's peer-to-peer. Any two people can transact and exchange information or exchange or create a set of blocks on a chain, which is kind of one of the beauties of that architecture. It's also shared and replicated. Again, if that particular cup of coffee that I bought at Starbucks could be recorded by every single one of you here if you were computers. So that's what's shared and replicated. So it becomes hard to lose it. It also becomes hard to change it. Because you all have to agree that this transaction happened at this particular time with my credit card. The storage is permanent, as well as the validation agreement. So for this decentralized network to work, there has to be a consensus mechanism that says, here are the governing rules by which we all agree that this transaction actually happened. So that's another important part. And finally, there is an audit trail. It's the fact that I was here this morning, I had a cup of coffee, the transaction happened at Starbucks. All of that's recorded chronologically. So again, these are some of the key attributes of blockchain, which as technologists have really have gotten us excited about the possibilities of what it could do when you apply it to key business problems. So when it comes to health, here are all the things that, blockchain could be used for. Number one, information exchange. We've been attempting to tackle this problem at least since the 70s as we've digitized information and created electronic medical records. Anyone here happy with electronic medical records? Didn't think so. So a better way to exchange information and manage identity. I'll get into that. I'll give you more details on that. Second use case is around this interesting notion of collaborating without sharing. So at least in the healthcare industry, if you have health plans and payers that need to collaborate with hospital systems providers, all of us need to collaborate with life sciences and pharma companies, communities, and all other stakeholders in the ecosystem. But there is fundamentally a lack of trust between these parties. So does blockchain allow a mechanism and a framework by which collaboration can happen without necessarily sharing the underlying information assets? So that's another intriguing possibility. And lastly, I put this on there. There's several other use cases, but one of the key applications, I think, is around counterfeit drugs. That is estimated that about 250,000 children die from fake drugs every year. And if there was a way to sort of authenticate that a drug, in fact, is original and there's credentials around that drug, using a ledger that is validated globally through a decentralized network, there is hope for reducing that issue. So there's many more, but I thought these were some of the key applications of how blockchain could be used in healthcare today. And I'll double click into one or two of them. Here's an example of an application. So imagine the situation today, which we all vividly understand as participants in this healthcare system. Our data is, as consumers of health, is stored in hospital systems. It could be at the doctor's office. At Anthem, we get claims about consumers, so we have the claims information. Pharma companies have clinical trial information and real-world evidence and other bits of information. None of that is really ever put together holistically for consumers to understand and to really own. With blockchain, our hypothesis is that consumers can actually own that entire history about themselves and then make it available to whomever needs it via a permissioning-based system. So how would we do that, right? So again, if you go back to the definition I just provided, a bit of information stored as a cluster, a block, and then a cryptographic mechanism to chain it all together, a blockchain. So then the natural architecture of the technology lends itself to storing events chronologically. So health information, so if I went to see a doctor today, that could be recorded as a block on the chain. If I have certain conditions, that also could be recorded, and so on and so forth. So if I have a longitudinal view of my health history, that information then could be decentralized. Now, that doesn't mean that Cleveland Clinic's electronic medical records suddenly need to be liberated from whatever electronic medical record system is being used and into a blockchain. It just means that if I were a consumer of health at the clinic, a reference to that could be stored on the blockchain. And then if I was also a consumer of health at 4 other hospitals across the country, references to each of those places could also be stored on the blockchain, as well as, let's say I have claims with Anthem, Aetna, United, and 4 other insurance companies, although Anthem is the best, I hear, no biased opinion. Then those references could also be stored on the blockchain. So now you can see how, and plus let's say what drugs I'm taking could also be stored on the blockchain. So longitudinally you can see over 5 months, 10 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years, how you'd be able to build up your history. And then to use it, you likely need a friendly user interface. And one way to do that would be to create an app. And Anthem is in the process of creating such an app. We've codenamed it Vital. And so if you've used a thing, if you all are members of LinkedIn or Google or Facebook, they offer a mechanism that says log in with LinkedIn. So if you're logging in with LinkedIn to a new digital asset, it brings in your contact information, your identity, your context into that new asset. Same thing with Facebook. So if you log in with Facebook into, let's say a merchant's system, it brings in your information into that context and allows you to transact more in a friendlier manner without having to create user IDs and passwords and identities in every place that you transact. So what if you had a similar context, which is log in with your health identity as your own, and then you make your health information available to whomever you deem appropriate. It could be a doctor, it could be a family member, it could be a caregiver, it could be a financial institution in order to settle a financial transaction. But the idea here is that we can flip the paradigm to where consumers can own their own health information, and we can use blockchain as a mechanism for making that happen. Some other use cases. Frequently use cases with blockchain require collaboration with other parties. And the beauty of it is that the collaboration can happen without actually exchanging data. One of the key issues that we have in our industry now is every time we have to do analytics on data sets, we physically have to transfer the information, aggregate it somewhere, create the analytics and the insights, and then jointly decide how best to use it. What if instead we could leave the data in place and just have references to that data, and then federate the insights from all of those data sources without actually physically having to transfer that information? So that's the idea between what we were calling the Health Utility Network. This was launched about a year ago with the parties that are listed on this page. Some of our competition, including Cigna and other payers, as well as HCSC. And then we have a technology partner in IBM. The clinic is exploring actively to join this utility network as well. But what are we going to do with it? There are some cross-cutting industry issues for us to resolve. Things like coordination of benefits, where if you have insurance coverage with multiple parties, we have to figure out who pays what. And it's a non-value added activity across the system that no one benefits from. So if there was a cleaner way to do that, why not? So that's one of the use cases we're exploring. Alternative payments. So the idea of providers having to chase down member portion of their liability is becoming an increasing problem. One of the stats that I was reading was that approximately 30% of the consumers that leave a provider's office fail to pay their portion of their liability. For lots of reasons, but one of the reasons is the fact that the bills that are sent, the multiple bills from the hospital, multiple bills from the health insurance companies, are all very confusing, so they just toss it out and never bother with it. So rather than doing that, what if we can settle that transaction in real time and we collect the payments from the consumers? Again, this is something that we're enabling through blockchain as another use case. And then provider onboarding. Why do we all have to do the same thing over and over again just because the insurance company is different? How many forms do we have to fill out? How many times do we have to send the same information? How much waste are we creating in that process? So why not put an end to all of that and find a cleaner way in which we can do provider onboarding, provider credentialing, and all of the basic foundational utility that needs to happen across the system without having to do it redundantly for each payer. So that's another use case we're exploring. There's many more, but the key takeaway for all of us here is that beyond the buzzwords and beyond the hype that blockchain is going to solve world hunger and other economic issues, there is fundamental promise in the near term, in the here and now, which requires us to collaborate more effectively. But the beauty is we can collaborate without sharing the data. So we can protect the information that's prized to us each individually, put the consumer in the middle as the owner of information that belongs to them, and then create the collaboration network around them that's trusted, that's friendly, accessible, and real time. Thank you, and have a great rest of the conference.